Hey everyone, in today's video I want to read you guys a bedtime story. I want to be reading to you The Princess and the Goblin King by George MacDonald. And this book is actually not mine, I borrowed it off a friend. But as a little kid I had this story as a movie on VHS and I absolutely loved it. When I was younger I was kind of afraid of the characters. I found them really scary, but over the years I've really grown to love the story, and this will actually be my first time reading the book. So I thought it would be nice to share that experience with you guys. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. The Princess and the Goblin. Chapter 1, where the princess has a story about her. There was once a little princess whose father was king over a great country full of mountains and valleys. His palace was built upon one of the mountains and was very grand and beautiful. The princess, whose name was Irene, was born there, but she was sent soon after her birth, because her mother was not very strong, to be brought up by country people in a large house, half castle, half farmhouse, on the side of another mountain, about halfway between its base and its peaks. The princess was a sweet little creature, and at the time my story begins was about 8 years old, I think, but she got older very fast. Her face was fair and pretty, with eyes like two big bits of night sky, each with a star dissolved in blue. Those eyes, you would have thought, must have known they came from there, so often were they turned up in that direction. The ceiling of her nursery was blue, with stars in it, as like the sky as they could make it. But I doubt if ever she saw the real sky with the stars in it, for a reason which I had better mention at once. There's this image of little Princess Irene. These mountains were full of hollow places underneath, huge caverns and winding ways, some with water running through them, and some shining with all colours of the rainbow when the light was taken in. There would not have been much known about them had there not been mines there, great deep pits with long galleries and passages running off from them, which had been dug to get at the ore of which the mountains were full. In the course of digging, the miners came upon many of these natural caverns. A few of them had far-off openings out on the side of the mountain, into a ravine. Now in these subterranean caverns lived a strange range of beings, called by some gnomes, by some kobolds, by some goblins. There was a legend current in the country that at one time they lived above ground and were very like other people, but for some reason or other, concerning which they were very different legendary theories, the king had laid what they thought to serve taxes upon them, or had required observance of them they did not like, or had begun to treat them with more severity in some way or other, and impose stricter laws, and the consequence was that they had all disappeared from the face of the country. According to the legend, however, instead of going to some other country, they had all taken refuge in subterranean caverns, whence they came out but at night, and then seldom showed themselves in any numbers, and never to many people at once. It was only in the least frequent and most difficult parts of the mountains that they were said to gather even at night in the open air. Those who had caught sight of any of them said that they had greatly altered in the course of generations, and no wonder, seeing they lived away from the sun in cold and wet and dark places. They were now not ordinarily ugly, but either absolutely hideous or ludicrously grotesque, both in face and form. There was no invention, they said, of the most lawless imagination expressed by pen or pencil that could surpass the extravagance of their appearance. But I suppose those who said so had mistaken some of their animal companions for the goblins themselves, and which more by and by. The goblins themselves were not so far removed from a human as such a description would imply, and as they grew misshapen in body, they had grown in knowledge and cleverness, and now were able to do things no mortal could see the possibility of. But as they grew in cunning, they grew in mischief, and their great delight was in every way they could think of to annoy the people who lived in the open air soaring about above them. They had enough of affection left for each other to preserve them from being absolutely cruel for cruelty's sake to those that came their way, but still they had so heartily cherished the ancestral grudge against those who occupied their former possessions, and especially against the descendants of the king who had caused their expulsion, that they sought every opportunity of tormenting them in ways that they were as odd as their inventors, and although dwarfed and misshapen, they had strength equal to their cunning. In the process of time they had got a king and a government of their own, whose chief business, beyond their own simple affairs, was to devise trouble for their neighbours. It will now be pretty evident why the little princess had never seen the sky at night. They were much too afraid of the goblins to let her out of the house then, even in the company with ever so many attendants, and they had good reason, we shall see by and by. Chapter 2. The princess loses herself. I just noticed this part was coming up while I was reading, so I'm gonna put that off there. And I will put it back on once we're done with this video. Chapter 2. The princess loses herself. I have said that Princess Irene was about 8 years old when my story begins. And this is how it begins. One very wet day, when the mountain was covered with mist, which was constantly gathering itself into raindrops and pouring down on the roofs of the great old house. Once it fell in a fringe of water from the caves all around it. The princess would not, of course, go out. She got very tired, so tired that even her toys could no longer amuse her. You would wonder at that if I had time to describe to you one half of the toys she had, but then you wouldn't have the toys themselves, and that makes all the difference. You can't get tired of a thing before you have it. It was a picture, though, worth seeing, the princess sitting in the nursery with the sky ceiling over her head, at a great table covered with her toys. If the artist would like to draw this, I would advise him not to meddle with the toys. I'm afraid of attempting to describe them, and I think he had better not try to draw them. He had better not. He can do 1,000 things I can't, but I don't think he could draw those toys. No man could better make the princess herself than he could, though. Leaning with her back bowed in the back of a chair, her head hanging down and her hands in her lap, very miserable, as she would say herself, not even knowing what she would like, except it were to go out and get thoroughly wet, and catch a particularly nice cold, and have to go to bed and take gruel. The next moment after you see her sitting there, her nurse goes out of the room. Even that is a change, and the princess wakes up a little and looks about her. Then she tumbles off her chair and runs out of the door, not the same door the nurse went out of, but the one opened at the foot of a curious old stair of worm-eaten oak, which looked as if never anyone had set foot upon it. She had once before been up 6 steps, and that was sufficient reason in such a day for trying to find out what was at the top of it. Up and up she ran, such a long way it seemed to her, until she came to the top of the 3rd flight. There she found the landing was the end of a long passage. Into this she ran. It was full of doors on each side. There were so many that she did not care to open any, but ran on the other end, where she turned into another passage full of doors. When she had turned twice more and still saw doors and only doors about her, she began to get frightened. It was so silent, and all those doors must hide rooms with nobody in them. That was dreadful. Also, the rain made a great trampling noise on the roof. She turned and started at full speed, her little footsteps echoing through the sounds of the rain. Back for the stairs and a safe nursery. So she thought, but she had lost herself long ago. It doesn't follow that she was lost, because she had lost herself though. She ran for some distance, turned several times, and then began to be afraid. Very soon she was sure that she had lost her way back. Rooms everywhere and no stair. Her little heart beat as fast as her little feet ran, and a lump of tears was growing in her throat. But she was too eager and perhaps too frightened to cry for some time. At last her hope failed her. Nothing but passages and doors everywhere. She threw herself on the floor and burst into a wailing cry, broken by sobs. She did not cry long, however, for she was as brave as could be expected for a princess of her age. After a good cry, she got up and brushed the dust from her frock. Oh, what old dust it was! Then she wiped her eyes with her hands, for princesses don't always have their handkerchiefs in their pockets, any more than some other little girls I know of. Next, like a true princess, she revolved on going wisely to find her way back. She would walk through the passages and look in every direction for the stair. She did, but without success. She went over the same ground again and again without knowing it, for the passages and doors were all alike. At last, in a corner, through a half-open door, she did see a stair, but alas, it went the wrong way. Instead of going down, it went up. Frightened as she was, however, she could not help wishing to see where yet further the stair could lead. It was very narrow and so steep that she went on like a 4-legged creature on her hands and feet. I think I'm gonna stop reading there for now. If you liked this video, please let me know in the comments below, and I could always read another chapter from this book if that's something that you'd be interested in. If you have any requests, also let me know in the comments below this video. And if not, I hope that you found this relaxing and that you'll have a very nice day or good night.